Hello, human. Reflective Self here with a new episode of Living Lessons, where I get to share honest insights from lived experience. Lessons that capture moments of clarity, vulnerability, and human understanding. Today's episode is all about anxiety, uncertainty, and the stories we tell ourselves before reality arrives. And so here's the lesson that I've learned. There's nothing to worry about until there's something to worry about. Although it may sound simple on the surface, it can be hard to actually live by these words. Because sometimes, the hardest part is not the something itself. It is the waiting that happens before. It is the anticipation, the unknown, the stories that our minds start writing long before reality has had the chance to speak for itself. It got me reflecting on a time when something incredibly small took place. Or at least, something that should have felt small. For some of us, it may be the text message that arrives least expected. The email notification from a person we wish had forgotten to check in. The doctor's appointment, where we await news of our test results. The delayed response that forces us to wait in anguish. For me, it all started with a phone call. I remember seeing my sister's number appear on the screen, and almost immediately, I felt my body shift. There was heaviness in my chest and an anxiousness in my breath. All I could do was panic with racing thoughts and questions. What did she want? What have I not done this time? Does she know that she knows? What's strange is that none of it happened consciously. It was almost automatic. It felt like my mind had already started rehearsing, like it had reached into a drawer and pulled out an old, worn-out script. One that had been written over many years of shared histories, sensitivities, and misunderstandings. One that prepared me for all the possibilities, like how I would respond if my life plans were called into question, or how I would compose myself if my emotional buttons were pushed. And so I breathed and let the final ring pass before answering. As I said hello, it sounded less like a greeting and more like a question mark. But then something unexpected happened. She responded with warmth. She simply asked how I was doing, and almost instantly, I felt regret. Not because of anything she had done, but because of how much suffering I had already created within. She just needed a favor and hoped I could help. At that moment, my body softened. The heaviness eased from my chest. My breathing returned. The something that I had emotionally prepared for quickly dissolved into nothing. And for the next 15 minutes, my sister and I laughed and brainstormed the magic we would create together. Both present in forward momentum, both untouched by the past. And what stayed with me was not just the relief, but the realization of how compelling the mind truly is. Nothing is quite as powerful, quite as complex, quite as vulnerable as the mind. It helps us survive. It helps us sense danger. It helps us emote, love, dream. It helps us create meaning and imagine possibilities, both ordinary and extraordinary, that are worth moving toward. But for all its wisdom and wonder, it can also become an echo chamber for fear. As much as it can elevate, it can also devastate. Whatever it feeds on, it only amplifies. And the very same mind that serves to protect us can also quietly convince us to stay right where we are, to worry and suffer prematurely. On the surface, our minds are at their most practical. We know to reach for the sweater when the temperature starts to drop. We know to stay alert before crossing a busy street. We even know to rest when the exhaustion from our day starts to speak. But below the surface, there is a part of our minds where clarity rarely trespasses, where the mind slowly drifts away from practicality and into something much murkier. A place where clear thinking gives way to reinterpretation, rehearsal, projection, and overanalysis, where stressful moments are magnified into every worst-case scenario, where suddenly we are no longer responding to reality itself. We are responding to versions of reality that have yet to arrive. And still, we live them in our bodies as if they already have. It is where reality gets rewritten as an imagined future, often born of old memories, wounds, fears, and expectations. This does not mean that we should turn a blind eye to all worst-case scenarios. There are moments where preparation matters, where caution matters, where discernment matters. It may simply be a matter of reframing these scenarios, to see them as possibilities rather than absolutes, to ask ourselves, what is actually within my control? And if so, what can I do to help minimize these outcomes? This can allow us to move forward without feeling defeated. Because once we have done what we reasonably can, once we have prepared, communicated, planned, considered, adjusted, and shown up honestly, then there comes a point where worry no longer serves a purpose. A point where, when there's nothing more we can do, there is nothing more we can do. Beyond that, our minds start to hold uncertainty hostage, trying to force clarity out of it. And life rarely unfolds so neatly. One of the hardest human experiences is waiting without resolution, waiting for a response, waiting for news, waiting for clarity, waiting to know whether what we feared was actually real. And in those spaces, the mind desperately wants to finish the story early. It wants a verdict before reality delivers one. But uncertainty is uncomfortable precisely because it remains unfinished. And that is where the real test begins, where we learn to find comfort in the unknown, where we learn to exist inside unfinished spaces without allowing our minds to immediately fill them with disaster. Not because nothing bad could ever happen, not because uncertainty suddenly becomes easy, but because not every possibility deserves an emotional home within us. So why allow worry to grow into something it may never need to become? Why respond to imagination when we can respond to reality? Some possibilities are simply possibilities. And when the moment arrives, if it arrives. We will meet it with greater clarity. We will know how to feel, how to respond, and what is real. But until then, all we can do is wait. And that is the lived lesson that I've learned. It's not a universal prescription, but it is mine. Keep what stays, release what doesn't. Until next time.